Hi, I'm Marie Elizabeth Molly, and this is Relationship Alchemy. Today, I'm going to be speaking with Johanna Lynn, and we're talking about dropping the story, understanding intergenerational influences on relationships. Johanna is a highly trained systemic therapist who offers resolutions from longstanding issues to participants in online classes with a focus on dismantling family patterns, restoring relationships, and cultivating resilient boundaries. She's the founder of the Family Imprint Institute that offers training for holistic professionals that supports them in offering fast, deep, and lasting change for their clients and themselves. I am so excited to welcome you today, my fellow Mexico resident, Johanna. It's so great to meet you. Welcome to the show.
Nice to be here with you. Thank you for the invite.
Yeah, I'm so glad. So I just love everything family dynamics, epigenetics. So let's just dive right in. Where do you like to begin?
Wow. Well, it's such a vast topic. It's hard to pick. I usually let the client lead for where I begin because it's most meaningful to where their sort of heart is compressed and the challenges that they're up against. I think the big piece around understanding this topic, to make it seem a little less technical, is that none of us get to be the way we are by accident. We're very much influenced by what's unresolved or what hurt our parents and even our grandparents. And so it's neat to understand we've got a context here, and it helps us to go back a little bit to unresolve and to untangle what's going on today.
Absolutely. I'm so with you. I actually work with an epigenetic healer, and sometimes we go way back more than to the grandparents, really through the family line, the things that get passed down.
Yeah.
So how do you suggest someone begin to understand this idea? I think we're pretty familiar with like our parents influence us, but when we're talking about things that have come down through a family, how does someone begin to confront that conditioning and change it or do what they can with it?
Yeah. I think a big step is to look beyond our parents. As you say, we've come to recognize, oh gosh, my mom was super critical or my dad was really controlling and it had this effect on me. But I think a really healing step that brings so much clarity is to start to look at what was dad's environment as a little boy? What was dad's relationship with his dad? Notice I'm not using the term grandpa, because I think when we think of our grandpa, we think, oh, what a tender, easygoing guy. But he may not have been that way to dad. And so this can provide some clues. We start to get underneath maybe where love stopped flowing, where a lot of hurt might be just under the surface. And I think as kids, we might not notice any of that goes on. But perhaps once we've been married for a while or once we've parented for a few years, we start to recognize, it's not as easy as it looks from the outside. And there's lots going on under that surface.
Amen. So what kind of things do you notice? What would be a clue to someone in their current relationship that they need to look back there? What kind of things do you see?
I think it's those recurring arguments where it's like as many times as I've expressed my needs or as many times as I've said this bothers me, it still keeps happening. We still get stuck by those same pitfalls, trouble with boundaries, trouble with communication, really expressing our needs, being the people pleaser or walking on eggshells. These are some of the common dynamics we see that I guess shorten how much we can enjoy a relationship, or we feel like we have to be a certain way in order for love not to leave.
Yeah, and that be a certain way is so powerful a phrase because I think we really learn that as kids.
Absolutely. Where we need to censor ourselves, where we're too much or laughing too loud. And I was just teaching a class about attachment and authenticity. And when we're about to compromise who we really are, we'll do that every time in order to keep that attachment. And so we want to look at what's driving my being overly nice or being overly helpful when really my body is saying, I don't want to take on one more thing. I just don't want to get involved. And we're like, oh, sure, I'll help you with that. And so we're trying to match up how our body's really feeling with what we're agreeing to and how things are really going on the outside. And so that really comes back to, could we be ourselves as kids Were we accepted as we are? Or did we feel like we had to be a certain way? Imagine even in performance mode for our own parents to be loved and accepted.
Absolutely. I'll use myself as an example. I definitely got the message that I had to excel and I had to perform well. I had to do well in school. I had to be appropriate in social settings, not be too loud in order to really gain their approval. And I know I'm not alone in that. I'd rather talk about me than disclose any of my client stuff. And so in order to unpack that and actually get free, once someone's aware of those patterns, let's say they have a people-pleasing tendency or they have a perfectionist tendency because that's how they got love, then what?
Yeah, then what indeed? That's where the rubber meets the road.
Right?
And so then I would be my first step as I build a 3-generation genealogram. So we're seeing, perfectionist tendencies, or here's where I give myself away for connection. We're making those initial connections.
Yep.
And then we start to flush out. So if I became a perfectionist because I have a highly critical mom, we don't really resolve that relationship if we're feeling like I've always got to keep mom at an arm's length. If we're in defense mode, we actually can't be open to resolve. So one of the first things I like to do is understand what's behind mom's criticism. Where did that even come from? Because I think if we're held as holding it as personal, we don't have much of a chance of kind of feeling it from that place. So first we want to widen our lens. We want to really get a greater context. And sometimes we do have to include grandma's circumstance and even great-grandma's in some unique circumstances. So the whole time, really, it's about providing context. How do we take it out of being personal? Maybe a lot of your listeners are like, well, that was my mom, and that's pretty damn personal, Right. I understand that it comes from there. But we want to understand the full story, almost like we could take 100 steps back and see it from there.
And do you find, because what lands for me as you're speaking is when we take that step back, I feel more compassion for the parent that was a certain way. And by extension, compassion for myself who had the parent that was that way. And I feel a loosening of the grip of my judgment or my trauma or my pain or my suffering around the thing. Would you say that's generally what happens?
Oh, yeah. I couldn't have said it better. When we're in the grip, we can imagine there's not much movement towards release or healing and I think the real catch-22 is when we recognize, oh gosh, this piece back here with my mom, this is the stopgap between what I really want in my intimate relationship or what keeps happening in the relationships that don't work out. And so in order to, I guess, come to terms with what happened in our past, we've really got to make sense of it. Because I think without that piece, we don't really live the resolution. We might get it up here, but it doesn't really change in the way we love or the way we can relax in to receiving what that other person might have to give us.
I think that's so true, because that relaxing in, that being able to trust love in the present, when it was so conditional in the past, say, is often a tricky move. Like, it's not a given that we trust that love could be something we could rest into now if we didn't have that experience before, wouldn't you say?
That's it. And I joke a little with my clients that we get what we expect, but only every time.
Yeah.
So if I'm expecting you're going to break my heart, you're going to let me down like they did, well, it's almost like our own script. And yes, it's unconscious. And yes, it lives out in the way we protect our heart and how we might be defended. And I've just seen it I've been in this practice for too many years to think, oh, that's a one-off or that's a coincidence. It's almost like life saying, how do you want to work with it this time? What are you going to do this time around?
Yeah. Oh, that's so true. Yeah, I think we've been in practice a similar amount of time, like over 20 years apiece, I think. And you see a lot of repeating patterns, as not to reduce people to patterns, but you do see certain things that repeat, wouldn't you say?
Definitely. I joke with my husband that I joke with my husband that I can't even watch a movie anymore without seeing some of these threads and patterns. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we could have a whole other conversation about, but my partner and I love to dissect reality TV and like characters and kind of the dysfunctions they're playing out and stuff like that. It's our pastime.
Yeah. It's such fun.
Yeah. So I'm always interested in how someone might begin to shift these patterns. So, the first step is to gain awareness, right? I love that you have a 3-generational map, or I forgot, what was it called? It was like
Enneagram, 3 generations.
Enneagram. Yeah. And so you can really see the lineage. So then once someone has that, how do they begin learning to love differently?
And so I think what's really interesting is once we see something, we can't unsee it. So that has an impact in itself. And it's very interesting to look at the whole nature of your family all written out. So we see very clearly, oh, geez, right. If grandpa was a prisoner of war and he came back traumatized and he shut down and didn't talk with dad, no wonder dad can't be with me when I cry. Or, by that time I came home from school brokenhearted and he just left the room. I always felt he didn't care about me. And so there's these things we now hold completely differently. And the brilliance of the approach that I use has a lot of understanding of neuroscience, has a lot of understanding of how the brain changes. And so we get into, I guess we're not changing our past, but we hold it differently, see it from a different perspective. And there's a big part of healing language in this work where you're sort of or hearing those words coming to you that may never really be spoken from your dad. But we know through neuroscience that our brain doesn't care about the source. So if we're relaxed, we've got our eyes closed, and we're in this sort of therapeutic situation, we can really change the way our genes express by being able to visualize, receive it, take it in. And so now we go back to that, say, family dinner with dad, and we don't show up with that, pain or hurt. It's like we're free from it. And the whole dinner today now goes very differently.
Oh, yes, it does. It changes everything. Yeah, because when you come in with a different energy, you're met with something different. There's at least a chance to be met with something different. Or what I find is if the person isn't willing to shift how they relate to you, even if they're relating in the old way, it doesn't land the same.
That's it.
So it's either the person shifts how they talk to you, or you just don't receive what they're saying in the same way you used to. It doesn't land in the same hole.
That's it. It's just
that right?
Nowhere left for you to be reactive about it. It's almost, there's God.
There it is.
Just down.
There's dad. Yeah. Dad.
That's it. That's
it.
Yeah, so we're hooked. What a freedom that is.
It's huge. It's the best freedom to feel unhooked from that stuff, because then you can allow it to be there, but it doesn't hit you in the same way. And very often, do you find this with your clients as well? Like we fit like a lock and key into our relationships, right? But then when you start shifting something, you're shifting the shape of the lock. And so the key can't quite fit in the same way. And so then that's how the relationship begins to change.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's all. Yeah. And so then I love neuroscience. I'd love to unpack that a bit more. So do you do hypnosis kind of thing? Like you described a kind of hypnotic space. Is that how you work?
Well, you picked that out. So my background before finding systems approach is clinical hypnotherapy. And so, yeah, that's it. And so they fit together like just a perfect combination. And so when I came across understanding how our family system really shapes us at the unconscious level, it's just like, oh, you're speaking my language. I get this. And the two kind of merge together to be such a powerful approach.
It really is powerful. Are there other modalities you bring in as well, or are those the two primary?
I work with integrative body psychotherapy as well.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, the understanding that we might get it at a cognitive level, but if we're not able to bring it into the body and shift and change our reference point, We just know why our relationships don't work out instead of changing the way we show up and changing the actual flow of it.
That's so huge because I want to really highlight that for our watchers and our listeners. It's not enough to know why things are the way they are or to know where the patterns come from. There is a behavioral and physical embodied shift that also needs to couple with that to have real change. Did I cap what you said? Well,
oh, yeah, definitely.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's key to remember that because I think as a culture, we get really fascinated with knowing. I talk to people all the time who are super self-aware. I don't know if you find this as well. People are super self-aware about their stuff, but they're still in it.
Yeah. Well, and I think maybe it's an overall movement from how we used to really just do talk therapy and maybe we'd be committed once a week forever and ever, gain that self-awareness, and we'd really learn maybe we learn about attachment sciences or we learn about, all this good stuff, but yet our lives aren't really changing. And so there are amazing people like Peter Levine who brought forward, the somatic experiencing therapy, where looking at the animal kingdom and how if something stressful happens, they literally shake it off. But we as human beings don't do that. And so there is a process that we need to really unwind how that experience sits in us. And I think then you cross over epigenetics and you understand, oh, it isn't just what happened to me and how I might have hypervigilance or depression or all kinds of things that come out. And so we can actually unravel the things that have imprinted our DNA. And so it's what we can really change inside of us.
And so what kind of results, as someone does this work, what kind of results do you see them have?
I work a lot with people in relationships. And I think the question maybe we would all want to hear is, oh, we can't happily ever after and we reunite, and it doesn't always work out that way. Sometimes the happiest and most healthiest thing to do is separate, yet do it peacefully. Yeah. Do it without tearing each other down or harming the children involved. And so sometimes it is a guidance through separation that doesn't pull you apart in every direction. Of course, it's going to be heartbreaking, but how do we do it with kindness and understanding? Again, how do we not take it personally that, I don't know, even she or he had the affair? What's the affair a symptom of? And how does that relate to the deeper pieces so we can finally resolve it and let it go? And sometimes it is the reconnecting and estrangement between a mother and daughter after 20 years. And sometimes it is finally living without anxiety and coming back out into life, feeling more open and trusting. And so it's so different because it really depends what the person is coming in for. But I think the overall similarity is a stronger connection within themselves, knowing why they do what they do, why they get lost in certain places or give themselves away for connection. And that happens less and less.
Yeah, that's so powerful to see those literal changes in what happens, how we show up in the relationship, the kinds of behaviors that we end up engaging in. I'm just thinking about, it's reminding me, I talk about sometimes this, like the old impulse may fire, it's so hardwired in the brain. And so like that abandoned response or that fearful response or that perfectionist response or whatever the response is might fire, but it's like our capacity to not act on that first response expands. Do you find the same where it's, oh, there's that response. Like we can even be aware that response is firing and make a different choice.
That's it. And I think I would even add to that the acknowledgement that we catch that firing and, wow, that's a tender piece for me. How might I be able to take care of myself, the part that got triggered? How can I even be proud of myself that I didn't go down that same neural highway that used to sink me every time?
Every time.
I was in another way forward.
Yeah, so
I think when we celebrate those moments, it's so important.
I agree. You and I are so in line because I believe in celebrating those moments big time, because it's like people start to sometimes beat themselves up because the thing fired. And I'm like, no, it's going to fire. Like it's been there for 100 years.
Right.
But you caught it and you didn't go down that track. That's amazing. That's the celebration. Yeah.
That is,
Yeah.
yeah, expect the firing. That part's okay. What are you going to do about it?
What do you do with it? Yeah, totally. Oh my God, I could talk to you forever, but I know that you have a beautiful meditation to share. First of all, you have such a gorgeous voice. I just want to, it's dreamy and delicious, and I can listen to you all day. So I'm so excited to share this gift with our listeners and watchers because they'll get to hear more of your beautiful voice. I think it sounds like. Do you say a word about it?
Yeah. Well, I think we all live in such busy, compressed lives. And so it's a gift for your down, listening to the body, and just stepping into this place of softness. So I hope that they'll like it.
That's beautiful. And there was a little bit of a glitch in the internet. What was the name of the meditation?
To be good to yourself.
Oh, listen to that, guys. To be good to yourself. Grab that meditation. It's going to be, the link to it is down in the show notes. So if you're driving, don't do this right now. But when you get home, go down into the show notes, click that link, get the meditation. And do you have any final things you'd like to share?
I think for your listeners, it might be nice to reflect on we are only as needy in our loving relationships today as our earliest unmet need. I think a lot of people make themselves wrong for their natural needs in relationship instead of maybe leaning into compassion for why do I need that reassurance? Why do I feel that person might leave me on the edge? And so that's a big part of stepping towards that healing piece, is understanding what broke for you, what sort of got compromised in that love you naturally needed. So that doesn't have to play out in your relationship.
Yeah. This is such a powerful, I want you to say this phrase again because I want to really land it for folks. You're only as needy as
your earliest unmet need.
Amen.
Yeah.
Huge. And so to be compassionate, to recognize that it came out of that. And then it also, how far back in the family line do those unmet needs go?
Well, that's it. It really literally blew my mind to learn that these breaks between mom and babies can be inherited. So I might have had the closest loving relationship with my mom, but maybe her mom died when she was a baby. That lives in me as if it happened. And you're trying to think, why do I feel so insecure? How do I? And it's all in the deeper family system.
Well, thank you so much for being here today. It's been really a pleasure to talk with you. And everybody, you can go down into the show notes, find the meditation, also find the links to Johanna's social presence, her website. If you're a clinician and you're listening to this show, check out her institute because that sounds fascinating. And thank you again. I so appreciate you coming on.
It was such a pleasure to spend time with you. Thanks again.
And I love that we're both in Mexico. That's just like such a sweet detail. All right. Have a beautiful afternoon.